Apple Card is the credit card created by Apple. You earn 3% daily cash back up front when you use it to buy a new iPhone 15, AirPods, or any products at Apple. And you can automatically grow your daily cash at 4.15% annual percentage yield when you open a high-yield savings account. Apply for Apple Card in the Wallet app on iPhone. Apple Card subject to credit approval. Savings is available to Apple Card owners subject to eligibility. Savings accounts by Goldman Sachs Bank USA, member FDIC. Terms apply.
Saturday. Christmas comes early.
Unbelievable! Welcome to this incredible scene.
Bills.
To the end zone!
Chargers.
It's a touchdown!
An exclusive NFL game.
That's fantastic!
Live in primetime.
Wow!
Only on Peacock.
With a Christmas gift to their fans. They're having some fun now.
Bills versus Chargers. Saturday, 7:30 Eastern. Exclusively on Peacock.
Tired of ads interrupting your favorite show? Good news. Ad-free listening on Amazon Music is included with your Prime membership. Download the Amazon Music app or visit amazon.com/ad-free sports. That's amazon.com/ad-free sports to catch up on the latest episodes without the ads. Enjoy thousands of Acast shows ad-free for Prime members. Some shows may have ads.
Serie A Chronicles is a Media Chronicles production.
Now, before we start our chat, we want you to head over to serieachronicles.com/Patreon now and subscribe to the Chronicles Tifosi membership with a free 7-day trial. Get priority access to every episode and voice note before the rest of the world. Plus, no ads and bonus Patreon-only exclusive episodes and video episodes. Also, be sure to join the new chat community in the Patreon app and chat with fellow subscribers. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Serie A Chronicles podcast. I'm Mina Rizuki, and as always, I am joined by Nikki Bandini and Patrick Kendrick. I'm sorry, I was barely able to pronounce your names there, but I have somewhat gotten over my cold. You'll be all...
Nikki Bandini and Patrick Kendrick.
I like it.
Nikki, I'm still trying to recover my voice after that horrendous illness, but I think I'm somewhat there.
Everyone's been sick.
Everyone's been sick. This is what happens. We're also on 26 days without sunshine in England,
Yeah.
So it's really fun times being here. Before we get into the podcast, I just want to say, give us a 5-star rating and a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening. It helps us to be found. For our Chronicles Tifosi Patreons, make sure you join the chat in the Patreon app. Hello, guys, and welcome. How are you? And did you see the draw for the Champions League?
I did, and I don't know if I'm going to be the voice in the minority here, but I actually think it could have been worse for the Italian teams. I think when I was looking at the being in pot, well, all 3 teams are in pot 2, right? So you weren't going to get 3 gentle draws. I think there were not many draws on the table that looked good for the Italian teams. I think Lazio, you could have put them with any of the 8 teams they could have drawn against, and I would have said, well, they're going out. So to me, who Lazio drew sort of felt immaterial, and I'm sorry to be so dismissive, and I would love it if Maurizio Sarri and Lazio proved me wrong, but I think they've already overachieved to some extent by reaching the knockouts, given how they're playing this season. I think that I'm not saying this in a way that's in any way dismissive of Atletico or Barcelona, but I don't think that those are the very best teams that were in that first pot. I think the very best teams that were in that first pot were Manchester City, Real Madrid, maybe Bayern Munich.
That's it.
And this is where I'm going to get shut down for being a fan, but I actually think Arsenal
don't even say
Arsenal
Arsenal.
To get by.
Yeah.
I do. I think they're one of the hardest ones to get by. Whereas I definitely think that Atletico Madrid are a good team. They've obviously Barcelona are a good team, but I don't think these are teams that I see as flawless teams. And I do think that it's still going to be uphill for Napoli, no question. But I think that Inter against Atletico for me is a very, very even tie. I don't see there being a strong favourite in that tie at all.
Okay, just to go through them, it's Napoli against Barcelona, it's Inter against Atletico Madrid, It's Lazio against Bayern Munich, in case our listeners don't know.
Yes.
Patrick, what do you think?
I thought it was quite interesting that Nikki named the three sort of probably the strongest teams in the competition. And I do find it curious how they seem to have got the most benign draws. If you think, I think Real Madrid have got Leipzig, haven't they? Man City have got Copenhagen and Bayern
Man
Munich.
City never get us tough.
When Bayern Munich have got Lazio. So I think those three are pretty much shoe-ins to the next round. I think it's an okay draw. I actually think Italy would have had a better chance had Inter drawn Barcelona and Napoli drawn Atletico Madrid. I feel like Napoli on current form, and this is me being quite honest. I'm all in on Serie A. My knowledge of La Liga is not particularly extensive, but what I would say is I feel there's something about the aura of Barcelona, and we saw it. I think it was the 2019-20 season, wasn't it? When, admittedly, that was probably a stronger Barcelona side. That was the lockdown season, wasn't it? When Napoli played against Barcelona. I just feel like a team like that still has a bit too much for Napoli, just in terms of a psychological hurdle, particularly in this season where they've been underperforming. And I'm not sure whether I necessarily back Mazzarri's Napoli to go to Barcelona and get a result. So it's a case of, if they lose there, can they win by a bigger margin than Maradona? I'm not necessarily sure.
I see where you're coming from and almost feel like the reverse of that, though. I think Naples and the Stadio, I still want to call it the San Paolo sometimes, the Diego Maradona, like, it was made for these nights. It was made for it. And against Real Madrid, the atmosphere was fantastic. And I thought that was one of the better performances of Rudy Garcia's time in charge, that home game against Real Madrid. They still lost it because Jude Bellingham is there.
They just lost. That's that, yeah.
Yeah, but Real Madrid and Barcelona are not equivalent. I think that's the key point. Barcelona have conceded, I think, 19 goals already this season in the league. They are vulnerable. I think that
Their pants.
it doesn't mean that Napoli are going to necessarily win. I'm not trying to make that argument, but I think that Napoli are very capable of hurting them. And then who knows what can happen. I think that will be a very chaotic two-legged tie. And I think that chaos might suit Napoli in the long run, but I'm of course, February's also a long way off.
I agree in theory. What I would say is I'd counter that by saying Napoli have lost this season at home to Empoli, to Fiorentina, to Lazio, to Inter. I mean, against the big teams, they haven't really performed. I know they won in Bergamo, but I don't think we can equate Atalanta to Barcelona. But yeah, just coming back to the other Italian sides, I think Inter would have been a good match for anyone. I actually think Atletico Madrid are going to be tricky for them, because I think Inter are at their best when they come up against teams that want to dominate possession, want to play football. We've seen that recently in their last couple of away games against Napoli and Lazio. You know, they seemed quite happy. I mean, I know we'll get onto the Lazio game later on in the pod, but they seemed quite happy to allow the opposition to have possession, not really afford them any chances, and then they were very good in transition. So I just wonder whether, if Atletico Madrid just say, here, you have the possession and try and break us down. Admittedly, this is an Inter side that has a lot more solutions and a lot more creativity than we've seen in previous years. But I think of all the coaches they could have come up against, Diego Simeone is probably one of the trickier ones to get the better of.
Well, Simeone, who always said he was going to coach them one day. Again, I think this Atletico Madrid team is not the Atletico Madrid team that people have fixed in their heads. This is, again, a team that's conceded 16 goals already in La Liga this season. It's not this sort of invulnerable tank that's going to roll up to San Siro and just not move. But having said that, they are actually quite an entertaining and expansive team when they want to be, and they can punch you back with Griezmann playing as well as he is. So I think it's definitely a tough tie. I'm not trying to suggest it isn't. And I think that your analysis is probably spot on about the possession. But it's not that Atletico Madrid team that I think people have in their heads that never concedes a goal. It's not that team at all.
Okay, guys, I am sorry. I'm supposed to be a presenter in this, and yet all I want to do is be like, no, and start giving my opinion. So I am going to give my opinion because I can't resist. I do think that if all the teams that I didn't want Inter to face, it was Atletico, I'll be honest with you guys. I do think that they're not defensively strong, but I do think that they're a lot more fun going forward. And I think that they have a very pragmatic coach who hasn't lost a single home game now for 20 games. And I think that they'll win their home game. It's about Inter winning theirs and what happens in the goal, what goes on between those two matches. I think this is going to be a really interesting tie because if anyone's going to really study Inzaghi's team, it's going to be Cholo Simeone. And that was the team I didn't want them to face. I would have preferred them. I think they would have smashed all the other teams, I'll be honest with you, except for maybe Manchester City. And that's the only one that I'm upset about. When it comes to Bayern, interestingly, their best midfielder for so many years, if anyone says anything, is Joshua Kimmich. And yet when he hasn't played twice, they've put in their best performances, including over the weekend against Stuttgart. But again, we have to know that it's going to be February. So what are the teams like? Will Bayern have now found themselves again? You know, will Inter still have a top team? Will Lazio, I don't know, start finding goals? I somehow don't see Lazio in any way, shape or form getting over this. As for Barcelona, I think they're pants. I'll be honest with you, they are awful to watch. I really genuinely have no idea how if they had any other group, they wouldn't have qualified out of the group. But they had the easiest group, and they lost their last game, even when they bought players that they shouldn't have bought because they were trying to get the money from winning a match. Like that's how bad their finances are. You know, they've lost a lot of their players, you know, with injuries and stuff, as have Real Madrid, to be honest with you. Something's going on with fitness schemes at the moment, or maybe it is too many matches. But I think Napoli with Osimhen and Kvaratskhelia, if they start to find themselves, and that's a big if, but if we see the Osimhen that we saw from this weekend, I'm actually pretty hopeful. So that's where I stand. But let's talk about the matches. And I think that we should start off with Patrick did a great voice note after that interesting match between Inter and Lazio. Lazio have always won these matches at home against Inter, or have done at least for a long time. And Sarri has never lost to Inter in his coaching career. So that's something to really, really talk about, in all honesty. I think that most people would have predicted a clear Inter win based on form, and they managed to show us just how good that they can be. And I don't know whether this is something that we need to whether we should discuss this from a Lazio side or from an Inter side, because I think we know Inter is so good. But if anyone has ever thought that a midfielder makes all the difference, or doesn't believe in that, then look at Milan without Kessie. Look at Lazio without Milinkovic-Savic. Look at Milan without Tonali. You know, look at Juventus without Rabiot. Midfielders and key midfielders make all the difference. And Lazio are a shadow of themselves from the team that had Milinkovic-Savic. Discuss.
It's hard to disagree with that. Inter, just to pick up on what you said there, Mina, Inter had not won at Lazio since 2018. The two times they've gone there with Simone Inzaghi as manager, of course, former Lazio manager, they got beat 3-1. And what's the big different ingredient? Yes, it's Milinkovic-Savic. Milinkovic-Savic was the identity of this Lazio team, and it feels really repetitive to talk about them this season, because every time I just feel like that's the issue with Lazio. They have not moved on. They have not found a new identity. They've sort of asked other players to try to do some of what he was doing, but they haven't got anyone who can do it as well as he did it. And I'm trying to avoid that word interesting, which is such an easy one to use. It was an interesting game. I'm trying to avoid just repeating it, because Lazio did make life difficult for Inter. And up until Inter scored, the game did feel sort of in the balance. But I never really felt like in my heart watching it that I believed they were going to score. So then when Lautaro does score, after that, the greatest jeopardy after Lautaro's goal goes in, as I put in my talking points yesterday, the greatest jeopardy was the moment when Lautaro's jumping over the hoarding to celebrate and nearly catches his boot and falls over. Because after that, Lazio are done. Once Inter have scored, they're done. And I think that is probably more about Lazio than it is about Inter. Inter, yes, it was another of these games where you show that you don't have to play your best football to win. But I think this game reflected more on the decline of Lazio between last season and this season to me.
Head to SerieAchronicles.com/Patreon now and subscribe to the Chronicles Tifosi Patreon membership with a free 7-day trial. Get early access to every full-length episode and voice note before the rest of the world. Plus, all episodes are 100% ad-free. And you get bonus Patreon-only exclusive episodes, video episodes, and behind-the-scenes extras. Also, be sure to join the new chat community in the Patreon app and chat with fellow subscribers.
Looking for a fun way to win 25 times your money this football and basketball season? Test your skills on Prize Picks, the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projection for a wide variety of stats, and place your entry. It's as easy as that. If you have the skills, you can turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps. Easy gameplay, quick withdrawals, and injury insurance on your picks are what make Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Ready to test your skills? Join the Prize Picks community of more than 7 million players who have already signed up. Right now, Prize Picks will match your first deposit up to $100. Just visit prizepicks.com/play100 and use code PLAY100. That's code PLAY100 at prizepicks.com/play100 for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy.
Tired of ads interrupting your favorite show? Good news. Ad-free listening on Amazon Music is included with your Prime membership. Download the Amazon Music app or visit amazon.com/ad-free sports. That's amazon.com/ad-free sports to catch up on the latest episodes without the ads. Enjoy thousands of Acast shows ad-free for Prime members. Some shows may have ads.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think what I would say is the thing about Milinkovic-Savic, it wasn't just his output in terms of goals and assists. And I think last season Lazio had 4 players in double figures, of which he was one. But it was also just they could play a lot more direct with him in the side, and even Sarri would occasionally go that way. I mean, we saw him because he had 8 seasons at Lazio, so the bulk of that first spell was under Simone Inzaghi. Obviously, the last 2 seasons he had under Maurizio Sarri. But Inzaghi's Lazio was very direct, and Sarri would even sort of borrow from some of that because he would win so many flick-ons. He's 6'5". The amount of times he would flick the ball into space for Immobile to run onto, or he'd find space between the lines, and defenders would have to step out, and that would allow Immobile to make those runs in behind. I think Lazio don't really have anyone stretching the pitch or pulling players out of position at the moment. It's all quite samey. And for the brilliant career that Pedro has had, he's an 87, so he's 36 now. We've seen Luis Alberto was dropped, but even then Zaccagni's been blowing hot and cold when he plays in that wing position. And I just think that the difficulty for Lazio is without Milinkovic-Savic, he often used to occupy or preoccupy a couple of defenders. They would double up on him, and that would naturally allow other players as a sort of domino effect to be unattended. And I think Lazio were able to create overloads and score goals because of that. Without that, they've become a lot more static. They've become a lot more predictable. They're just a possession side, albeit without necessarily anyone who can change the tempo. I mean, Zaccagni, for all of his excellence last season, 10 goals in Serie A, he's not exactly got blistering pace. It's, you could understand it a lot more. This is going to sound like a real disservice to Lazio, but even if they had someone like Cagliari Zito Lovumbo in the side, someone who can just go and commit a player and beat them with pace, suddenly you get in behind, you can have cutbacks, you have the opposition running back towards their own goal, the own goal itself comes into play if you have players facing their own goal and there are crosses coming in like that. I just feel they're so predictable. And what it really reminded me of, I was looking at the statistics whilst on commentary. Inter hadn't conceded a single-headed goal this season. Lazio hadn't scored a single-headed goal this season. So Inter, it was bizarre. They just kept putting the ball out for a corner without any concern whatsoever because they knew that Lazio would just not score from that corner. Then you add to the fact that Rovella was just sending in these moon balls, for want of a better word, just floating these terrible crosses into the box. It just became so easy for Inter, and it reminded me of Juventus away at Fiorentina, which was just cross after cross after cross. It's like, you keep crossing it, we'll deal with it. And I completely agree. It was Lazio at least hadn't afforded Inter any chances. And then what do? You go and give Lautaro a goal in the season of his life. I mean, it was just, if you're a Lazio fan, if you're a neutral, if you're a fan of Juventus or Milan, anyone who wants to get involved in the title race or who doesn't want to see Inter just have this procession towards the Scudetto, it was enraging to see Marušić just not even look and just play that ball back to Lautaro. And I felt exactly the same as you, Nicky. That goal goes in. Inter aren't going to concede. It's a question of can they score a second or a third? And ultimately they did.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is the difference that we're having right now is that, Sarri has been asked about this and he said, about what his performance is like of Lazio this season in comparison to last season. And he thinks that they overachieved last season and perhaps underachieving this one, and that their true value is somewhat in between all of that. When it comes to predictability, he said Barcelona won 10 years playing the same way. At Napoli, in 3 years, we scored 30 goals with the same move of Lorenzo Insigne cutting inside and crossing to Callejon, sorry. And so there is that element of it, but their players are just simply not good enough for them to be unbeatable in their predictability. Perhaps that's one way of putting it. Another way of saying it is that, yeah.
But we had a really interesting conversation about this before we started, and I sort of wanted to get brought up on a pod because I thought you made a really sort of interesting response to that, Mina, when you were talking about, I mean, that's just Arjen Robben, right? Arjen Robben, you knew exactly what he was going to do every time, and he did it, and it didn't matter because he was brilliant at it. And to some extent, I think it's probably overstating it to call him a one-trick pony, but I remember there was definitely a period with Thierry Henry where you knew exactly what he wanted to do. He wanted to drift out to that left flank, come inside and shoot on his right boot. He wanted to do it. Great players definitely learn these moves.
Great teams
will keep doing them.
Great
until
teams
you stop
do
them.
it too. As in, exactly what Juventus's Conte used to do at the time. It was always the ball out to Lichtsteiner, to Pirlo, who delivers out wide, to go back in. It was always the same moves. And yet you still had to, I mean, there was one, I remember this perfectly written piece at the time by Garlando and Gazzetta, who said, exactly what Inter's going to do under Conte. Exactly what they're going to do. Stopping them, however, is the hard part. So sometimes, it is about rehearsed movements. You said that, Patrick. It is that is the mark of a great team, is a team that their movements and patterns of play. Trying to stop that is, of course, where it comes and becomes a lot more difficult. So predictability is not necessarily a bad thing. And I think Sarri is so great in always calling stuff out like that. It is perhaps the ability that they don't really know how to shine through that, perhaps.
I think that the one word that came to my mind when Nikki said it there, talking about Robben being a one-trick pony, immediately it came to me. I said, well, what is Lazio's trick? I can't tell you what Lazio's trick is this season. If Sarri was saying, okay, we're predictable, we've got these brilliant patterns of play, fine. But maybe they had that in previous seasons. Maybe he's had that in previous tactical iterations. He certainly had it with his Napoli side. He had it with his Empoli side. Even in his single season with Juventus, okay, there was a lot of reliance on Ronaldo and individual talent. But, Sarri has consistently been able to call on very good players. And I don't know how many very good players are left in that Lazio side. I'm a huge Ciro Immobile fan, but his output is on the wane. And then you look at the rest of the team. I mean, yes, Luis Alberto on his day is one of the best number 8s in Serie A. But beyond that, if you go 1 to 11, Lazio's best team, I think we take Ivan Provedel, but that's not really helping. Although, ironically, I say that in a season where he has actually scored a goal. But I just, when you're looking at the likes of, I mean, Romagnoli's injured at the moment, but Husai is a soldier for Sarri, but very uninspiring. Lazzari is a very middle-of-the-road player who then managed to get himself sent off ridiculously in the game at the weekend. Pedro, world-class, but now 36. Zaccagni has had one very good season in his career. Castellanos, who scored 1 goal since he signed. I mean, this is a fairly uninspiring team in terms of the actual sum of its parts and even in terms of the raw material. So I think Sarri, they shouldn't be down in 11th place, but I think in terms of talent and quality this season, they are probably about the 7th or 8th best team in Serie A. So maybe he's right. So perhaps getting them to second last season was a combination of just ignoring European competition and also that one last dance of the sort of trio of players, Luis Alberto, Immobile and Milinkovic-Savic. And then one of those left and the other two haven't been the same since.
We also have to talk about, last season, perhaps Serie A wasn't that great in the sense that a lot of teams were sort of underperforming, whether it be Inter, Milan, Juventus, obviously several others. So Lazio could really profit from that. But this season, we have a remarkable Inter team. And yes, Lazio had 60% possession for the first hour, but Inter have now kept 11 clean sheets in 26 games, the best in all the top 5 leagues. They are 4 points now ahead of Juventus.
Do you mean 16 games, Mina? Sorry.
What did I say? So in 16 games, I put 26. Thank you.
26.
They are now 4 points.
They wish. They'd be 10 games further along towards the Scudetto.
It's entirely true.
Yeah.
But 11 clean sheets in 26 doesn't actually sound that great.
No.
Provided you're scoring one more goal than the opposition, I guess. But yeah, that's a little caveat.
But they are 4 points ahead of Juventus in second place, something, that kind of lead that they haven't enjoyed and being top of the table since February 2022 to stand alone at the top. They have 15 more goals scored than Juventus. I think it's really interesting that Thuram and Lautaro Martinez combined have scored, is it 22 or 23 goals? I think it's 22 goals. And that's
22, 15 plus 7.
And that is 2 less than the entire Juventus team, which is something. I mean, if there was ever a moment to be like, maybe we should self-lavish, I think this is it. Anyway, but they are just a stunning team right now. I'm particularly very taken with Marcus Thuram, but Lautaro Martinez is having the season of his life, and he deserves all the compliments offered to him. Is it them? Is it this team? Is it Inzaghi being the best coach in Serie A?
It's everything. And I think those clean sheets, let's not sort of forget again, another game this weekend with not your first choice defence, because you've got Bissek starting where Pavard would if he'd been able to play. Bissek who immediately looks super confident. I feel like sometimes, even though I try to talk about him when I can, just not enough in general is said about Francesco Acerbi at 35 years old, and the fact that he just handles opposition number 9s as well as I think anyone in Europe practically, and doesn't get much said about it because he's not particularly glamorous. Everyone talks about his backstory and overcoming cancer, which is an incredible story, but I don't think enough people talk about the fact that he's just really, really stinking good at defending. And actually, I heard Marcus Thuram talk about that recently, where he was saying that in Serie A, he feels like some defenders have been trying to counter his pace by standing off him a lot, and that's a mistake, because if you let him get running, he's going to burn them. And they were saying, oh, who do you think's defended you well? Acerbi. He says that Acerbi's the one in training who knows how to disrupt him and stop him from getting that step. And I think his know-how has been immense. Bastoni's a more sort of exciting story to talk about because he's the up-and-coming player, but I think Acerbi is really the glue that holds all that together. And what a sort of canny signing, if you want to bring it back to Inzaghi, because that is 100% an Inzaghi signing, even though, of course, he's not the one who controls the purse strings. That's a player who he wanted because of what they had done together at Lazio.
And he said as much, didn't he? I remember on the eve of either the first or the second Champions League semi-final leg against Milan, Acerbi said, I'm only at the club because of Simone Inzaghi, because he pushed to sign me, because he believed in me. And I think there's a lot of parallels in Acerbi's career trajectory to that of Giorgio Chiellini. He seems to be getting better with age in the way he acquires experience, seems to thrive and absolutely relish, as you said, the art of defending. And he's an organizer. He's not blessed with pace, but he's never out of position. He seems to instill confidence to the 2 players either side of him. I think if we come back to Inter in general, what's so impressive is, yes, those clean sheets, but those clean sheets are more often than not coincided with victories, which I guess is fairly logical, because Inter are going to score in almost every match. There's going to be very few teams that keep them quiet this season. But I was looking at their wins. They've only won 2 matches where they've conceded a goal. They won in Bergamo 2-1 against Atalanta, and they won the derby 5-1. And even then, the goal from Leao was, it was fairly innocuous in the end. So I think that's what's so impressive, and that's why they have this ludicrously good goal difference of plus 32. And I think it's what we've been saying in recent episodes. It just points towards Inter winning Serie A at a canter, because, and I was talking to our producer Simon about this on off air before we started. It feels like, I know we'll get on to Juventus, but it feels like such a strain in terms of emotional energy and just being drained. The psychological concentration it requires for Juventus to win matches by an odd goal or by keeping a clean sheet just means that even though they're only playing once a week, rather counterintuitively, I actually think Inter are the fresher of the 2 sides, because Simone Inzaghi is frequently able to make his 5 substitutions beyond the hour mark, knowing that the game is already won because they're 2 goals to the good. And so therefore, you get those players, even those that stay on and play 80 minutes or what have you, or Acerbi consistently plays 90 minutes. When you're winning 2-0 and you have a team that keeps possession as well as Inter do, there is no real danger there. There's no real jeopardy. We mentioned it earlier on, once Lautaro scored that goal. And I just think there seems to be this freshness to Inter that none of their rivals can necessarily match. And we saw the European campaign taking its toll on Milan and taking points off them domestically. And we've seen with Juventus, you just leave yourself no margin for error. And we saw that at Marassi on Friday night against Genoa.
I'm someone who believes a lot in the psychological and things that are above football, put it that way. I believe sometimes that Osimhen saying to Spalletti over the summer that he believed that Napoli could win it was really the galvanizing point that pushed them. It was him, it was his belief in the squad that changed things. And I do think right now that the relationship between the players at Inter, the love that they seem to share for one another, is making a difference. And Real Madrid were very much sort of the blueprint for that. I remember them talking about what they call the pineapple. And they said that they were all part of a pineapple that was so glued and in love with one another that they were able to win 3 Champions Leagues in a row. And these things make a difference in Inter right now, having the time of their life. But so could Napoli. I mean, finally, it was a win against Cagliari, 2-1. We saw the very best of Osimhen. I say that because I've never seen anything like the second goal. I mean, I have, because Iniesta was very famous for that. But he managed to drag away 5 players that were all surrounding him and still managed to deliver the assist that then Kvaratskhelia scored. This was a very much needed win. And I guess my question to you guys is that, was this because Osimhen was brilliant and Kvaratskhelia managed to find a goal? Or is this them finding themselves as a collective unit being brilliant again?
I think it's probably a bit of both, to be honest. I think we saw it last season when both Osimhen and Kvaratskhelia combine and score. Napoli just are a much better team because of it. I think they are both such confidence players, and I think they're 2 very big egos within the side. And I feel like they're not happy. Even if the team wins, I don't think they're 100%, and I think this is a good thing. I think it's what inspired them to the title last season. But even if the team wins, I think unless both of them have got either a goal or an assist, mainly an assist in Kvaratskhelia's case or a goal in Osimhen's case, I don't think they're 100% happy. So when Napoli are able to get a win and they're both able to have that tangible impact on the score sheet, I just think there's a big sigh of relief from the fan base, from their teammates, from those 2 players themselves. And then they just seem to relax a bit more. And I don't think we saw enough of that under Rudy Garcia. And I think that's what prompted those really sort of that dissenting behaviour when we saw them taken off by Garcia, because more often than not, it was when they hadn't made an impact on the game. Maybe they made some nice runs, they had good chances, they'd created opportunities, but they hadn't either scored or set up a teammate. And I think we just saw them sort of shrink. I don't think you can underestimate how much of a toll it took on Kvaratskhelia, the fact he went 6 months without scoring in Serie A till he got that goal against Udinese. So I think if they can get into that habit that they had last season where every single game, either one, if not both of them, is scoring, then suddenly it's that magic momentum that you need, because I think Napoli will win more games than they will lose, provided those 2 perform. If you keep those 2 players quiet, I think Zielinski's levels dropped off. Politano picked up a lot of the slack early on in the season. And this was a big win for Napoli, because it was quite awkward circumstances. They're up against a Cagliari team. A lot of people aren't familiar with the fact that Cagliari see Napoli as arguably their staunchest rivals. It's not dissimilar to how Napoli view Juventus, or how, probably even closer, is how Fiorentina fans view Juventus.
Is it delusion?
In the sense that there was no, it's a case of there was a transfer back in the early 90s. Daniel Fonseca, the Uruguayan striker who had done well for Cagliari for a couple of seasons, then signed for Napoli, got sent off on his first trip back to Sardinia, and then the next trip back to Sardinia, he scored a brace against Cagliari. The home fans were giving him jip, and he gave them the old umbrella gesture, which is telling them where to go, and it nearly caused a riot. Then there was a relegation playoff for Cagliari in the late 90s, where the game was scheduled to be played at the San Paolo. They were up against Piacenza, and the Piacenza boss Bortolo Muti was announced as the new Napoli coach. So in true Neapolitan style, they got behind their new head coach and started cheering on Piacenza, and the Cagliaritani felt a bit miffed about that. They thought there should be Southern solidarity. One more quick anecdote. Daniele Conti, who was a bandiera for Cagliari and a club legend, despite obviously coming from a famous footballing dynasty in Rome, he said the greatest goal of his career came against Napoli just because of what it meant for the fan base. So you've got that. You've got a fact that Napoli are struggling. They haven't won at home since the end of September. They're up against the Cagliari side that want to beat them more than anything. They're up against the Cagliari side that a week earlier have just scored twice in added time again. So I think this was a lot harder game than people gave it credit for. And then on top of that, the game was pushed back half an hour because of strong winds in Naples. So I actually think this was a really big win. People look at it on paper, Napoli, Cagliari, they should easily beat a newly promoted side. But I think if you look at who scored and how they did it, and the fact that they scored a second goal so soon after Cagliari equalising, I think this is a massive psychological lift for Napoli. I really do.
I think on Osimhen, I mean, you talk about confidence players, and I think completely agree with you on Kvaratskhelia. With Osimhen, part of me feels like the only real opponent, as it were, that slowed him down in the last 2 years is just his own body. When he gets injured, he's not there and he can't score goals. But when you look at the numbers, last season he started 30 games, scored 26 goals. This season he started 10 games, he scored 7 goals. When he's on the pitch, he scores goals. Like it's an astonishingly consistent rate of scoring over the last 2 seasons, as long as he's available. And yes, when he's there and Kvaratskhelia are there, inevitably that attack is quite potent. And I think to some extent, in what feels to me like there are lots of interesting teams in Serie A this season, but also lots of flawed teams in the top part of the table. Inter have something approaching what feels like a complete team. Juventus, in an odd way, actually also feel like they're more about the collective than individuals. But after them, I think you are looking at teams who are reliant on certain individuals delivering. And with Roma, it's been very, very obvious. That's a glaring example of if Dybala and Lukaku are there together, then the team is threatening. If they're not, then oh well. And I think Milan, to a lesser extent, just because they have more, but still you're looking at this season, it's been Pulisic a lot. Giroud still scores most of their goals. Leao, you're still looking at those individual attacking players to deliver. And I think that Napoli, ultimately, it's the same thing. The difference in this team when Osimhen is there and when he's not is stark. Should that be surprising? Well, no, he's a club record signing. And if you wanted to buy him today, you'd probably pay close to 100 million euros. So that is what it is, I suppose.
Yep, I find it very hard to disagree with that. It's also worth noting that the entrance of Mario Rui back into the squad really made a difference because just having somebody who knows how to overlap and allow Kvaratskhelia to not be double teamed, if you like, to sort of not fight everything on his own on that side, makes a hell of a difference on a tactical level and allows Kvaratskhelia to be that much more free and that much more capable of scoring the goals that is required. While Udinese drew 2-2 against Sassuolo, they went 2-0 up, and then Sassuolo got 2 penalties.
Domenico Berardi decided to get a point for Sassuolo, yeah.
And I wonder what Mourinho thinks about that. But I want to just read out some of the messages that you guys have said, that you have sent us as well. I think there was a funny one over the weekend. As you all know, producer Simon is a massive Roma fan. And Daniel Bartolini sent in a message that said, funny weekend in the league. Love the Bologna win over Roma. Look forward to your thoughts on the Champions League draw. Jill said, as a Roma fan, I was jealous watching a Motta-coached team play. So we're not crazy when we say that, Mourinho isn't, maybe necessarily doing it right now. Wish Roma would hire him in the summer, but we will probably try to renew Mourinho. Yes, Jill, we love you. And we agree with you.
Let's get Jill on the show. Absolutely.
Yeah, we do need Jill. There's others as well. Jill was very happy that Patrick joined us. Nikki, do you want to read some of the messages that we've got? Because I think it's a bit weird to get.
Let's definitely get Jill on the show.
There's been loads of lovely messages of Patrick, which we can't let Patrick read out because he'd be embarrassed. But
yes,
yeah, had Jill, Kevin Chang saying very exciting news. Welcome, Patrick. Luca Napolitano, great news. Love hearing Patrick's analysis. And he'll be a great compliment to an already brilliant team. We like that one, Mina, because it also says that we're already brilliant.
Hear, 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 hear.
Lara Giovanale saying fantastic addition. It's great having Patrick on. We've as we said, we introduced him. We've both been big fans of Patrick's commentary before now. So it's brilliant having him be here and make these conversations into even more fun three-way conversations than it was when it was just the two of us.
A trilogue.
A trilogue.
To use a European Commission term, a trilogue. There we go. I digress.
And that's how you know that Patrick also does interpreting work and has that command of all the European bureaucracy terms that come up when you're doing that sort of work sometimes as well. We'll do a quick shout out as well to some new Chronicles Tifosi we've got who've signed up to our Patreon. Welcome, Halmat. I'm going to absolutely butcher this one. I'm really sorry, but Aynanshe Farah Hussein and Brian Powell, thank you all for supporting the show. That's it from us today. Obviously, we're coming up to Christmas now, so we're going to have a slightly different schedule next week. We're all going to record some voice notes off the back of the last Serie A round of... well, it's not the last one of the year, is it? Because there's another one after Christmas. But the last Serie A round before Christmas, we're all going to do some voice notes from, and we're going to stitch those together into a podcast for you guys. We will do a proper get together again in the new year, I think, with Christmas schedules and where Christmas falls this year. We just thought it's a bit too much to try and squeeze in a podcast between now and New Year. And also, you guys are all going to be off enjoying your Christmas as well. So we'll have one podcast from all of us with the voice notes in the next week, and then we'll come back together in the new year. So in the meantime, I want to say a massive Buon Natale from everyone here at Serie A Chronicles. I hope you all have your panettone and pandoro ready and all the other stuff that you need to enjoy a lovely, cozy Christmas. Thank you for supporting us through this year. And as I say, we will be back with a proper podcast at the start of 2024.
Happy Christmas. Feliz Navidad. No, just me. Okay, all right. Signing off.
Feliz Navidad.
Prospero año y felicidad. Right. That'll hopefully be in the outtakes.
No, that's going in the real pod.
That's going straight in.
Yeah, that is not going to be for the outtake.
Can we have something in Italian?
Yeah, we can. Buon Natale.
I said Buon Natale.
There you go.
Sports Social Podcast Network.
We all love the Low Country lifestyle, which is why we should do our best to protect it. To get insurance that helps you protect your home from whatever the Low Country throws at you, contact CT Lowndes & Company today. Their local agents can review your coverage to help make sure you're properly protected. CT Lowndes & Company has been helping protect and insuring the Low Country since 1850. Visit ctlowndes.com to learn more and request a quote. That's CTLOWNDES.com.